Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron, January 22nd, 2009. I'm 1 year older today. I can remember when I was one of my first jobs out in California. I was working on a Skybolt missile project for Douglas Aircraft, now McDonnell Douglas. And the personnel people said, Brian, you'll be able to retire in the year 2003. And I sat and said to myself, boy, that's a long, long way off. That may never happen. Well, guess what? 2009. Now I've been retired for about 10 years, one way or another. I had 2 or 3 attempts at retirement, but got bored stiff. So this one so far, I've been sticking it out. There's a lady at the library who also has a birthday on January 22nd, but she's a lot younger than I am. Okay, so tonight I'm going to start first with the agenda because I want to change the way. I do have the town businessmen with me again tonight to help me because we need some strength in these times. And I also have to talk about a lot about the town tonight and all this budgetary situation stuff. So I want these guys here to give me a hand with that. The agenda for tonight is January 22nd, 2009, is comments, which I will make after I go through the agenda. The 6th proposed 2008-2009 town budget referendum. I'll just recap that. I do that every time. The possible state of Connecticut for fiscal year 2008-2009 present revenue shortfall. There is a shortfall. I don't know what the term they use at the Connecticut state of Connecticut level, but there is a shortfall now. And then the state of Connecticut proposed shortfalls for year 2010-11. I should have 2009 there too. 2009-10, 2010-11, and then 2011-12. The proposed revenue shortfalls caused by this deep and long recession that we're going to be in here for quite a while. Then the town of Winchester, fiscal 2008 proposed budget shortfall. The year we're in right now, we still haven't got the budget approved, but should it be approved the way it's set up, we will have about a $500,000 shortfall, and the Board of Education is working on that with the superintendent of schools and Gilbert. The ramifications for the town of Winchester. Because of all these budget shortfalls at all these levels. And then I want to, if I have enough time, I want to talk a bit about the Enterprise Corridor. I want to talk about the fact that we have one president now, and just talk about a few things that he's accomplished in the first day or two. And then once again, I'll just give you an idea what Winstead's various stimulus package requests are. And we'll go from there. So now I'm going to go to the comments. You should see these town leaders on the back of me, and maybe we'll bounce back and forth a bit. I wanted a colored picture tonight to add some color to this dreary situation we're in, but I couldn't find one that was appropriate. But for tonight's comments, I want to say that there's a lot of stuff in the newspapers, of course, about our town. It always is, usually in the Register. The Republican seems to be a little more quiet now than it used to be in the past, but don't believe everything you read or hear. People are innocent until proven guilty in our society. I've been in societies where people were guilty until proven innocent, but here they're innocent until proven guilty, and almost everything you read, there are inaccuracies in, there are falsehoods in, some truths as well. The big problem is sifting it all out. So until people are proven guilty, you should assume they're innocent, give them the benefit of the doubt. That's the way our system works, and everybody will appreciate that. And again, let's try to get these 7 selectmen reelected. The ones that we don't think are doing too good, reelect them anyway, because as a team of 7, they're making a lot of progress, and they can lead us through the next 2 years after the election during very, very difficult times for everybody in the world with a minimum of disruption. And that's the way I think you should consider it. So pat them on the back, ask them if they're going to run again, and encourage them to run again. That's my message there. Now, despite this week's historic and rollicking presidential inauguration activities and related euphoria and celebrations, the economy continues to slide into an even worse condition, much of which has been discounted already by the financial markets. Now, maybe not all of it. Some people say we could have another 25% drop. A lot of the stocks are at kind of down near bottom now. I'm not an expert on this. Don't take any financial advice from me. I'm just trying to give you an idea what they're saying on all the programs that I watch and papers that I read. We hope that there won't be too much more of a drop. Of course, housing prices are still going down. There will be more of that in selected areas around the country. Last I knew, Connecticut went down so far about 16%, and Litchfield County about 10 or 11% on average. These problems are reducing fortunes, revenues, and tax income throughout the world, continuing the domino effect that extends to our state and hometown of Winchester, affecting our school system to a greater degree, perhaps, than expected. At the root of the problem are still the largest culprits: the clogged United States and global financial system, and the government's inability to rapidly help the now almost nationalized major banks. Nationalization usually is ownership of more than 51%. Some of these banks we already own 80%. There are a lot of banks in this country, and we're only talking here about 4 or 5 of the major banks that are, in quotes, too large to fail. But it's been difficult for the government to get the recuperation here and eventually get these banks to land on their feet. There's still a long time to go and a lot of work to be done there. I did see today where they have appointed the Treasury, Secretary of the Treasury, so that'll help a little bit. Next week, I think they're going to bring their plan to the President. But our problem now is at the present time, we can't even agree on an approach that will convince others that we have a plan for success. We can't unravel the mortgage-backed securities mess. That's where they took loans. Bank mortgages, say if I had a mortgage, they'd take it, they'd parcel it up into mortgage-backed securities, sell it all over the world. It's very hard for them to get to the bottom of that now so that they can clean up the mess. They're working on a plan for that. We can't unravel the mortgage-backed securities mess, so we can't, so that we can isolate the majority of the toxic bank loans to enable the government to corral them in a bad bank. That's sort of all the toxic assets. They're thinking of trying to corral them into a bank they call a bad bank, possibly owned by the government. The old Wall Street expression still holds: when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. This is especially true this time, except this time it may be when America catches a cold, the rest of the world catches pneumonia. Milton Friedman, the famous supply-side economist that I've mentioned many times on this show and pay tribute to in the credits at the end of the program, once said, and I now paraphrase, if you give the government a desert to manage, like the Sahara Desert, for example, they will run out of sand within 5 years. He was not a proponent of government managing businesses. And he's not the only one. There's 2 sides to that story, as you can see every night on all the newscasts and on all the C-SPAN programs and all the legislative meetings at all levels, Connecticut and United States, and maybe even a little in Winston. When I went to then very socialistic London, England in 1971 to help run ICL, some of the major corporations were nationalized. The government owned 51% or more of those companies because they had gotten into trouble, financial trouble, and needed an infusion of capital from the British government. To a great extent, the taxes on the wealthy were very high, real high, and many of the largest wage earners and most skilled and trained experts of all ages were emigrating to other countries as a result. Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada we were the recipients of a lot of these people. They were doctors, they were well-trained secretaries, they were engineers, they were executives, all kinds of more capitalistic orientated people that didn't want to remain there. And of course, they recruited in turn people from the emerging countries to be their doctors and nurses and secretaries and things like that. Margaret Maggie Thatcher, the Ronald Reagan of England at the time, was desperately trying to import capitalistic executives to run the companies in the UK. That was not an easy task in a socialistic environment with exorbitant taxation. You know, that's why the Beatles left the country at one time to protect a lot of their assets. That's why the Rolling Stones left the country to protect a lot of their assets, I'm told, and read in the papers. And all kinds of people tried to get out of that tax system. The English tax system, if you leave, you're not subject to taxes in that country. Our tax system is a little different. If you leave the United States, you're still subject to American taxes over here. So when I was in England, I had to file American taxes and English taxes, and then I had to work out the difference with my company. One of the old factories in Manchester had 126 different unions that had to be coordinated to get competitive products out the door to customers, many of whom were dissatisfied with the company. As a result of this, more often than not, they didn't get the products out, or they didn't get them out at the right standard. Hence many of the country's economic problems. When I travel behind the Iron Curtain to the hardline countries, it was easy to see that they were in the Stone Age product-wise. Most of the companies were owned by the government. So when I went into Moscow, after I got through Checkpoint Charlie and East Germany and went over to Moscow, I wanted to get a picture tonight of me at the Brandenburg Gate on the East German side, but I couldn't find it in the house. Probably turn up sometime in the future. I know I've got it somewhere. But anyway, these companies are owned by the government, and when I went around Moscow, I couldn't go outside of Moscow because they wouldn't let me, and I think I was pretty well followed in Moscow because I had a computer background. Americans at that time couldn't sell to Russia, but the British could, so I went in there as an agent of the British companies. But I'd see go in a store and see somebody using an abacus, and I'll say, "Why are you using an abacus?" And they say, "Oh, we're using an abacus to add up your bill because that's what we have in Russia." I said, "Why don't you use a cash register?" And they said, "Well, you know, the government owns the production of these abacuses, and they don't make cash registers, so we use the abacus." They were very fast with the abacus and very accurate. Then I'd see all the buildings were made out of cement, and they were multi-story, almost like council houses that were in Britain. And I'd say, "Why are these buildings all made out of cement and they have no architecture to them? They all look the same. They're drab." And they'd say, "Oh, you don't understand. The government owns all these buildings, and that's what you get when you have. There's no incentive to do a better building, because if you want to buy a building, this is what you buy. You buy what the government makes." And then I'd say, "Why are the yards all muddy? How come there's no grass here and flowers and things?" And they'd say, "Well, you know, all this land is owned by the government. There's no incentive to do grass and to do plant flowers, so we don't have much of that in this area." And then I'd look at the ceiling and I'd see an old Western fan, and I'd say, "Hey, why have you got this old Western fan?" And he said, "Well, Brian, you don't understand. The government owns the fan company here, and that's the only fan they produce, and there's no incentive to do a better fan, because if you want to buy a fan, that's what you have to buy." And then the sugar cubes that you put in your coffee were all shaped like little hearts, like a heart. And I'd say, "Why are all the sugar cubes faced like a little heart?" And he said, Brian, you don't understand. The government owns a sugar company here, and they produce these little hearts, and that's all. There's no incentive to produce any other shape, because if you want sugar, that's what you get. Then when I went to one of the few restaurants that was open, this was around 1968 in Moscow, mainly for visitors like me, right in the center. We were right there in the center of Moscow. The food was always cold. It was sturgeon with gelatin around it, some cold beetroot, and some potatoes, all cold. And I said, why is the food always cold in these restaurants? Well, Brian, you don't understand. The government owns all these restaurants, and if you want to eat here in these restaurants, you get what they offer, and they offer this cold food. And you can't tip the waitresses. They're not allowed, waiters or waitresses aren't allowed to have tips, so there's no incentive here to do anything any different. Storefronts. When you went to like a Macy's store, or any stores we have along our street in Winchester, the windows were not decorated, and they would have in one window a whole pile of shoes, and another window a whole pile of undershirts, and another window a whole pile of suits all mixed up. And you say, why aren't these windows more decorative and more a little easier to see what you've got in the store? And they'd say, well, you don't understand, Brian. These stores are all owned by the government. There is no incentive to decorate the windows. There's no competition. So if you want to buy shoes, you go in the store. So I went in the store, and there was tables all over the place, pile of stuff. And one of the tables had all the shoes piled, just like just a big pile of shoes and boots and things. And if you wanted to buy a pair, you had to find one and then rumble around the pile to find a mate for that shoe or boot. And I'd say, why is this? Why are they just piled up like this? Why don't you have the two shoes together, and why aren't they in some order that's easier to find them? Sizes and everything, because you had to search for everything. Well, Brian, you don't understand. We only have one shoe company here, and if you want to buy the shoes, this is the store you come to, and this is where, this is about what you have to do to get your shoes. So anyway, it went on and on and on. By the time I got back a few weeks later to the airport, I was exhausted, and I was really wanting to see some competition. Of course, when I went there in the future, it was, I knew what to expect. It was a little easier for me to understand it. But government ownership and the lack of competition is not what I consider to be the best approach. Now, let's hope we can find some happy mixture here. But there's a lot going on now that may lead us in the wrong direction. Of course, Glasnost eventually arrived, and they eventually tore down the Berlin Wall. That's where I went through Checkpoint Charlie, and they had guys standing there with machine guns. It was a little bit of a scary thing. That was mainly to keep people in, not to let other people in, but to keep their own people in from leaving. That was designed to keep the citizens from leaving the country. As a country, we are now walking on a fine line in an attempt to turn the economy around. The good news, for the time being, is the president's desire to be centralist. He's a Democrat. He's trying to be centralist and work with the other Democrats in the House and Senate, and with the Republicans in the House and Senate, and any other people that he can get to give him good advice. So far, he's trying to take that approach. Everybody first was a little worried that he might be way over on the left somewhere, as a little bit of the reputation he had in the past, but he seems to be doing a good job of trying to get people to work together and take a more objective look at the problems and the solutions to the problems. He treats everybody, as far as I can see, with respect and tries to include all the good ideas. Let's hope, for all our sakes, that he can pull it off, especially with his own party in the House and Senate. There seems to be a little bit of tension there. I'm sure that'll get worked out. And then with the Republicans in Congress, and eventually the citizens of the United States of America. Meanwhile, the Fed is quietly, quantitatively easing and using all means at its disposal within the system in an attempt to slowly solve the problems that we are facing and confront the inevitable inflation that will come somewhere further down the line. This is a tough one. Tonight I will discuss some of the possible impacts on our state, town, and schools of this recent recession. The first thing I'd like to do is just go quickly through this disclaimer. In Winston, this is very important, as everybody tries to pick you apart every word you say, but the state budget shortfall numbers are changing fast, and proposed solutions are still being debated. Part of that is because the packages that are going to be used at the stimulus package and the other packages that they're working on at the federal level aren't quite defined. And there's other reasons for the state having a short budget, budget shortfalls for the next few years as well. So the state budget shortfall numbers are changing fast, and proposed solutions are still being debated. The numbers used here tonight are approximate. They're approximate because they change every day, every hour, every week. And I've been in several meetings where, and you read the newspapers and they don't say the same thing from one paper to the next. And they're different, and some have later news than the others. So it's very hard. But these numbers tonight that I'm going to be going over are just to give you an approximate idea of where we stand. So first I will go over the 2008-2009 budget referendum, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Saturday, January 31, 2009, Pearson School as always. Let's hope we get some decent weather there so we get a good turnout. The proposed tax increase, 0 or mills or 0%. 1 mil under the new revaluation done in 2008 is $816,900. And the possible impact on the town of Winchester, assuming that we don't get any more from the state's 2008-2009 shortfall. The Governor, according to what I read and hear on TV, is she's trying to avoid going back to the towns and cities and asking for more tax money for 2008-2009. But we won't know that till it's over. But in order to achieve our own budget here, $136,856 for the town if this next budget, budget passes the referendum on the 31st of January. And the schools will have to go down $319,476 to achieve a 0 budget. And they'll also probably have to absorb this $125,900 one way or another that they're over budget from 2006-07 to 2007-08 and then into 2008-09, and I'm not exactly sure about that, but anyway, those are the kind of numbers that we're looking at if we do get a 0 budget. And there's a possibility this budget may get defeated because the school people are now finding out what the impact of this budget is, and they don't like it too well, so they may vote the budget down. So anyway, we don't know. We'll find out on January 31st at about 8:30 in the evening. That's the day we do the vote. And one of our problems has been we haven't been getting a very good turnout. And last time it was 1,306. We've had the first one was one of the second largest turnout, and then we won't know what this one will be. But last time it was 1,306 to vote the budget down. The 2009-2010 budget is due to the selectmen by March 15, 2009, and everybody's starting to work on those, and they'll have them in by that date. And the current fiscal year, 2008-2009, that we're in right now, will end on June 30th, 2009. So you can see we're accordioning together here. We do play the accordion on this program, but now we see these budgets are coming pretty close. We might not even have a budget by the time by March 15th. So anything can happen here. But and remember now that there's no excuse for being over budget because we're working to the last year's budget, 2007, 2008, until a 2008-09 budget is approved. So nobody has any excuse for going over budget. Now, where it is difficult for the town and the schools is they don't want to cut and then find out that the certain budgets got approved at the next time, and then they don't have the teachers there anymore, or they've already cut things, so they close the school down. So they got to be very careful. It's very difficult. It's not really good to run a business this way, and we would never run our own personal house this way, and we would never run a business this way. But that's the way we are. That's the way our charter is, and we're gonna do our best to live within that. Now, our approach for the 2008-2009 budget, and remember, I'm going to be talking now about the 2008-2009 budget, the one we're trying to get approved right now, that the town is roughly $500,000 needs to be cut out, and we don't even know where all those cuts are going to come from. We still need to see the town's breakdown, and we need to see a final breakdown from the Board of Education so we can see exactly where these things are coming. Some of the information is emerging now slowly. But anyway, decisions are due before January 31st because that's when the referendum is. So it'd be nice to know before the referendum exactly what's going to be cut out of the budget. Right now we just know a percentage cut for the town and a percentage cut for the Board of Education. And we don't quite know how the $125,000 is going to be absorbed. So that's some information we should know, hopefully by January 31st. Can't guarantee it. Various Board of Education public meetings are being held in an attempt to reach a conclusion. They held a meeting on Monday night this week, and I think there are 30 or 40 people from the schools and mothers and fathers and teachers and this and that. And they didn't like some of these cuts that were going to be proposed, so anything can happen here. The town was plus or minus $500,000. That includes that includes the school budgets, mostly the school budget. So the possibilities are for getting that $500,000 are. That's assuming there'll be a zero raise. This will all be relooked at if the budget fails on the 31st and we get an increase for the next time, or we have to live within this year's budget. They'll have to look at things. But anyway, there is a possibility that was mentioned at the meeting, and I saw this in the newspaper, of a Gilbert contribution of about $12,000. That hasn't been finalized yet. It won't be finalized till after January 31st, according to the Gilbert management, and we don't know. There's also Gilbert owes us something like $125,000 plus or minus because we didn't have too many students in there at a certain time, and that isn't due till next year. They offered to give it to us this year. I saw in the papers where our Board of Education doesn't want it this year because they're going to have a bigger problem next year, so they probably want to hold that off. Kind of makes sense. But anyway, that isn't resolved yet. Next is to eliminate spring sports at the middle school level. Baseball, softball, track and field. Eliminate 4 staff positions. That could save us about $50,000. And they are 2 language arts people, according to the newspaper, a 5th grade teacher, and a social worker. I didn't get a chance to go to this meeting. I didn't realize it was on Monday, so I didn't make it down there. But I got this out in the newspaper. And when you read the 2 different newspapers, you get a little different opinion, but it's roughly in that area. And then various supplies and textbooks, about $43,000 savings. Maintenance equipment, money for workshops, money for transportation. $80,000 can be saved there. Of course, there'll be inconvenience for all this. Unanticipated costs for oil and electric. This is a cost that they didn't know, they under budgeted for this year. And that's about $50,000 as they see it now. That'll have to be found. And a 1-day furlough by staff, reducing the school year by 1 day, saving about $40,000. So that's how they're looking at it now. The total is goes this way. Gilbert, if Gilbert chips in at $12,000, it will be $12,000. If somehow they chip in the $125,000, then it'll be 125 plus 12, or whatever the number is there, up in the hundreds. I'm not sure exactly 125,000, but it's in that neck of the woods. And then a K through 8, 470,000. That'll total 482,000 without the 125 in it. And the remaining will be the superintendent of schools, according to the newspaper, still has 23,000 to find one way or another, and that total will be 505,000. And then if they do take the money from Gilbert this year instead of next year, that'll affect these numbers, and some of the things they have to give up maybe won't have to be given up. But right now, according to the newspaper, is the Board of Education saying we don't want that $125,000 this year. We'll take it next year, thank you very much, because we're probably going to need it more next year than we have now. So now I want to point out to you, that is those cuts I just told you about that are being talked about. They're not cast in stone. There's still more meetings to go. They have time. I think maybe a meeting this week, I'm not sure, but or next week for sure. I'm positive there'll be at least one meeting next week, maybe more. And they'll try to finalize those numbers. And then, of course, they won't. If the budget passes, that's it. That's what they'll have to do. If the budget fails, then they'll get another crack at it, depending upon what the selectmen propose for the 7th annual town meeting and referendum. So remember, this is just for the 2008. That's the year we're in, that we haven't finalized our budget for. We're a good 6 months into the year. Started on July 1st, 2008. Ends on July 1st, 2009. Now, we're going to switch to another whole issue. By the way, the state is, again, they're about $1 billion down this year. So they're trying to find the money by restructuring at the state level and making cuts at the state level and looking at bonding and all kinds of things at the state level so they won't impact us. But that doesn't mean that they'll succeed, because maybe that billion will go up between now and then. We're in a very, very fluid state here in the world and in all these economies. And I want to tell you where most of the state shortfall comes from. It comes from the lack of taxes. People aren't making capital gains, so they're not paying capital gains taxes. People are unemployed, so they're not paying taxes on that. And that all adds up, especially when you have a large people down near Fairfield County and Greenwich down there that work in New York City, and they're not working in those big jobs anymore, and they're not making the kind of money they made, and they're not making that much money in capital gains or long-term gains in the stock market, so short or long-term gains. So that's hitting us pretty hard. Now I'm going to show you how hard the state thinks it's being hit now, and again, this might change in 10 minutes. But when I go home and look at TV tonight, I might find this a little different. But the state of Connecticut present budget projected shortfalls are 2008, 2009, $1 billion. Now, the last time we had a program was about $500 million. So just in a week or two, a new estimate has been made, because on January 15th, they got in information from the tax date. Taxes are due on January 15th for a certain level of income people. And I guess it wasn't what they expected it to be, so up we go to $1 billion. So we're hoping that doesn't hit us in the town of Winchester this year. It very well could, but they're trying like heck not to. Okay, but now we go into the next 3 years, and this has changed quite a bit just over the last week and a half or so. 2000, 2009, 2010, the state is going to have a $2.3 billion revenue shortfall, some of which will be passed on to us, the towns and cities of Connecticut. In 2010 and 11, $3.6 billion shortfall, if it all works out the way it's estimated and forecast now. And in 2011 to 12, another $4.1 billion shortfall. Now I put this slide up because I want you to see that there's not much hope here in sight unless something drastically changes here over the next few years and people start earning money and making capital gains and being able to pay these taxes. Now, one of the things this points out to you is that, you know, you just can't take from the rich like Robin Hood all the time and give to the poor. I saw one selectman says his favorite person is Robin Hood, a criminal who took from the rich and gave to the poor, in a fable, of course. Well, you can't keep doing it. You're seeing the impact of that now. If we keep doing that, we don't have any income coming in from these people now, and that's why we're having these shortfalls. So I just wanted to make that point. Now, the state also has, to its credit, $1.4 billion of the 2009-2008 budget reserved as a rainy day fund. That's a lot like our fund balance. So they could dip into that as much as they need to, up to $1.4 billion. I wouldn't think they want to take it all this year, but I don't know. So if they have $1 billion shortfall, they could probably take $1 billion out of here But I know they're doing other things, so they don't have to. So they want to take as little of this rainy day fund as they can, because even though it's raining today, it might be pouring tomorrow, and they might even need more. So, according to the newspapers and the TV programs, you watch Channel 14, I think it's 26, I'm not sure, on the 26th, you can see all the meetings going on down in Hartford and what they're talking about on these things. It is hoped to keep as much of this as practical intact at the state level. Okay, now, what will happen to the town of Winchester in 9 and 10? We know what's going to happen in 08 and 09, except for anything that the state might ask us extra for, levy a new tax or something like that. So we start with 9-10 here, and according to a meeting I went to, which with the subcommittee last week, it was on Friday last week, we're going to be next year. The Board of Education alone is saying they're going to be $1.3 million in the red, i.e., they'll have to find cuts to equal $1.3 million. Now, I see various things in the paper that has $1.5 million, right? And of course, if we have a zero budget, that assumes that there's a zero budget again next year, like we're trying to do this year, and we won't get anything from local taxes. And it also assumes no stimulus money will come for education. We don't know if that's true or false. I've been looking at the stimulus package information. It isn't baked in enough. Maybe next week we'll know more. I don't know if we'll know by Thursday when my program's on, but keep your eye on the paper. And as soon as everybody knows what's in these stimulus packages and how much is coming to the state level, and then at the state it's got to get parceled out to the towns and cities. So this assumes that we won't have a tax increase in Winchester next year, which may not be true. We could have a decrease or an increase or a zero. So, and then, but here we assume that it would be zero. And no stimulus money for education will come from the federal government. And if all of a sudden 1.3 million comes from the federal government, which we'll know in a few more weeks, maybe a month, then end of problem. If not, we're going to have to probably solve these problems for ourselves, most likely. And I think we've been told, please try to solve these problems by yourself, and then if things get better, it'll be easy. If you don't try to solve them for yourself and have a plan and they get worse, it'll be tougher. So what's our approach for 2009, 2010? Well, the town we're going to assume is a zero approach. I don't know exactly what they'll have to do. They'll have to maintain this 2008, 2009 spending level. They might want to change the mix a little bit, but we don't know anything about what they're going to do there. But we will know by March 15th when they come up with their plan. And if you watch the selectmen meetings, you may get some hints even before that. Keep your eye on the newspapers and all that. But for 2009-10, the schools are what we're going to talk mainly about tonight. And the proposals are due to the selectmen on March 15, 2009 by the Board of Education, because they're going to absorb most of this Connecticut state decrease and in money to the town of Winchester. They'll probably have theirs ready, according to the meeting I went to last week. They'll probably have theirs ready about a few days before March 15th, so they can submit it to the town selectmen on the 15th, which is the due date. The town proposal is zero or maybe a little decrease, maybe even a little increase as a possibility. If there's a decrease, we have to find the money from the budget. If there's an increase, we can allocate a little more to the budget. But we'll have to get that from taxes. Any increase will probably have to come from taxes. The Board of Education proposal so far, and again, this is a rough idea from the last meeting. I'll let you know next week what I find out at Monday's meeting. A 3.1 million decrease, including a possible zero increase in property taxes, may include, and you might have read about this already in the papers, what they call school district restructuring. And I'm going to try to explain a little bit of that to you tonight, as I learned in the meeting, and then I saw in the papers and over the last few days. The papers were reporting on the meeting, although when I was there, I didn't see any newspaper people at the meeting. I don't know where they got the information, but anyway, there might have been somebody there I didn't see. But the population, according to the superintendent of schools, the population in the town of Winsted is not maintaining itself at the elementary level. We're getting less students at that level. And as a result, there is a possibility to do restructuring. And their Board of Education committee, they've set up a subcommittee of 6, 7 people to look into what are the options if we do have to cut $1.3 million from the 9-10 budget. That has to be in by March 15th. What are the options? And I want to reemphasize, everything here is fluid. It's in a study state. Everybody can go to these meetings, you, me, anybody, and get your 2 cents in or write a letter to the Board of Education or do whatever you want. But anyway, the Board of Education Subcommittee will be meeting again Monday night, I guess 7 o'clock in the town hall. We'll be looking at several options, and I'm just going to go over these options with you now. There's nothing here that hasn't been in the newspapers, and there's nothing here that wasn't talked about in the meeting one way or the other last week. But, and remember, this is separate from what we do in 2008, 2009 budget. This is eliminate or reduce the use of or mothball Pearson School. So there's several options there, but it basically says close down Pearson School or leave it open with a minimal number of students in it if they, for one reason, legally they have to do that to keep it open, and or mothball the whole school so if things get better in a year or 2 or 3 or 4, we can reopen it again. And there's always a possibility also of just giving it out to somebody else for use, but I haven't heard anything about that yet. Also, move 7th and 8th graders to Gilbert so that the students that would have gone to Pearson will go to Gilbert as 7th and 8th graders to Gilbert. And they had considered, prior to the meeting last week, they had considered Region 7, sending the students to Region 7, and to the Northwestern Connecticut Community College. But they did talk to the leaders of both of those institutions, and as of last Friday, they said they couldn't accommodate these children. So those 2 options are now off the table, may come back on the table at some time, but they're not feasible, not considered to be feasible. Now, if the students do go to Gilbert, it's between Gilbert and the Board of Education and the superintendent of schools, they are considering that which teachers will teach these students. And will it be the Gilbert people who teach the students, or will they just house the students and having the K through 8 people teach the students? And that has to be resolved, because one of the reasons to close down Pearson is to save money and to be able to perhaps lay off some teachers. Now, I'm not going to go through that again because I don't know exactly. They didn't really talk numbers, maybe a little more. If they lay off the ones for the 708 budget that we talked about, then maybe they can lay off a little less later. So whatever happens in 708, well, that's $500,000 that is gone, and we'll still have to get to 1.3 million. So we might have to lay off more teachers. And I'm not going to go any numbers there because I'm not sure exactly what they would have to lay off. But there'll be teachers, there'll be maintenance people, janitors, things like that, and secretaries and whatever else, because the whole objective here now is to save the money on the heating in Pearson, save all the maintenance money on Pearson, save all the teachers, extra teachers that we need, if there's any overlap with the Gilbert, that kind of thing. So they're looking for that 1.3 million one way or the other. Also being considered are associated transportation, cutting out some of the buses, and so certain students will have to walk to school or be transported by their family or whatever. Long-range building costs, they're concerned about trying to cut some of those. I don't know exactly which ones, but that's a category they're looking at. They're looking at all the funding areas, see what's happening there. Moving costs, contract issues, they have to look at that, and the effect on morale. All those things have to be considered. So I want you to know that this is happening now. The meetings are going on. There's one or two a week. There's one a week or so for a few weeks on what's happening for 0708, and then there's a subcommittee working on 9, 10, and 10, 11 or whatever. And they're working closely. They're keeping an eye on what the state's going to be doing. They're in contact with everybody, and they're trying to come up with a plan, which is what they should be doing. But there's so many ups and downs here and ifs and ands and buts, and we'll know a little more on January 31st when the budget either passes or fails, and then we'll have to pin down 9 and 10 by March 15th. Those decisions will have to be made between now and March 15th, and there'll be plenty of acrimony. Not everybody will be happy with the decisions, but decisions need to be made. They won't make perfect decisions. It's a bit like sand and salt. You can't make, every decision won't be perfect. Some will please some people and displease other people, but one way or another, they have to live within their budget. And they don't have any other choice. Now, they can come to the taxpayers for an increase in taxes. That's going to be tough next year, because we're going to be in worse shape by that time, by July, than we are today. So that's my guess. It may not be true, but that's my guess. So have faith. Don't throw too many stones. Try to get positive ideas into these people that are in the Board of Education and into the town manager. Try to be as positive as you can. Try to show up for the meetings. Try to understand what's really happening. Don't listen to too many rumors. You got to be even careful what you read in the newspapers, because they don't always have all the facts. Sometimes these reporters have to leave before they, if these meetings go on until 10 or 11, maybe the reporters got to file their copy before that. So have some understanding of their problems as well as yours. And there's no easy solution here. I've been saying since the beginning of the program that we rely a lot on the state. And if the state ever crashes and doesn't give us the money, we're in the pickle. So we're going to be in the pickle next year. We're going to have to solve the problem. Now, I must say, though, that if we are, as Gilbert declining students, and if Pearson's, or if the middle school level number of students is declining, then, you know, we should be addressing these kind of problems anyway, right? One reason or another. So this is forcing our hand. That's natural selection. You know, we can only do with the money we get, and it's got to come from someplace. And I can tell you where it's not going to come from. It's not going to come from revenue. It's not going to come from revenue down the enterprise corridor, because we moved too slow. It took us 5 years, and we still don't have permission to put the water and sewer down the corridor, and the agreement from the developer to pay for it and do the job. As I always try not to look backwards, but had we done that 2.5 years ago, 2.5 years into the permit process, got it all taken care of, we might have that water and sewer in there now, and even though the development will not be going in right away, maybe some other businesses are going away, and I want to talk a bit about that tonight. So the enterprise corridor, that's important. It's the only way we can probably get any revenue in here for a while, even if it's not the developments, even if it's a few companies down the corridor. So this week, on Monday night, at the selectmen meeting, a senior citizen, Tony Canavo, he was in the real estate business as well as the construction business, and also a very heavy contributor to town as a community donation of his own personal services. He's been on all kinds of boards for years and years and years. He's been a mayor of the town and everything else. So he's pretty well respected by all the groups in the town. And he showed up at the meeting in the public comment section at the end of the meeting on Monday night, selectmen meeting, and he said that he has prospects for business down the corridor, down the Enterprise Corridor. There's a couple people that have expressed an interest in building buildings there and conducting commerce there. So he came to the selectmen and he asked, he said, look, I need the water and sewer down that corridor. And Tony asked, where does it stand? When are we going to get the water and sewer down the corridor? Now the answer was maybe next summer, but I don't think that's true. I don't think we're moving fast enough to get it down there next summer. It's not all our problem. Some of it's the developer got to move faster too. But, and of course, we're dependent now on the economy, which we weren't 2.5 years ago. Money was around, more readily available 2.5 years ago. But anyway, Tony wants to know when we're going to get the water and sewer. I imagine the town manager will be presenting a plan to him sooner or later to show what's going on. Where does it stand? What progress are we making? When will it be done? When can I tell these prospects that want to go down this corridor to establish businesses when they can do it? And how can we move it along faster? That's what he wants to know. And he's only one developer and real estate person that has expressed his opinion. I'm sure there are more. Now, I want to also say that I read the minutes from the last meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. They're not, they're not actually imperative that we finish the POCD in order to do the water and sewer down the corridor. As I said on previous programs, we could go to the state. The developer could go to the state once he gets all his plans and all his permits here, and he can apply with the state for a special exception to get onto their POCD and run his water and sewer up to there. And once he gets that permission and decides to do it, then we can use it for these other people that Tony Canavo and other people think are interested in going down this corridor and perhaps putting businesses in down there. So at the last Planning and Zoning meeting, they had the Torrington Planning and Zoning Commissioner and a person from the town, the planning person from the town in the meeting. They showed how you could do an evolutionary approach, which I've always preached on this program for 1.5 years, and do the corridor first, get the POCD agreed, then do whatever you want, the lake runoff or the town piece, do one of them as a second approach, and then a third approach. And this is kind of what the Republican selectmen want to do. It's what I would like to see done. I'm sure it's what Tony would like to see done. And the quicker we can get that water and sewer approved, and then we have to still get the golf course approved from the DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers. My view is that's a few years away. I could be wrong. But based upon what's happening at the Yale thing up in Norfolk and the golf course up in Norfolk and Canaan, it's going to take them a few more years, I'm sure, because people can protest it, they can sue, they can appeal to the courts, and that takes forever and costs a lot of money. So, but the best thing to do is to get this corridor done so we can get some other people down there. They're not going to be able to afford to put the water and sewer in. They kind of have to wait for the developer for that. But if they see it's going to take too long, they'll go elsewhere. They won't stay around here through 2-3 years waiting for us to tell them when they might be able to do some work in our, so that'd be more revenue loss. So now I just want to talk a bit about the one president, President Obama. So far, it's only been 1.5 days or so, and I've only got a few minutes left. So number one, he's ordered Guantanamo to close and stopped all judicial type efforts with the prisoners down there. So over, I guess, a year or two or a year or so, he wants to close Guantanamo, and he wants to stop, if we are doing any harassment to these, that's not legal, to these prisoners. Number two, he wants a wage freeze on White House staff earning $100,000 or more, and he's already instituted that yesterday, his first day in office. Not so sure I would have done it that way, but he did it, and sometimes the poor across-the-board cuts are not good. If you have people that you really need bad and they should be making some money, you should be able to do that. I'm sure he probably can do that by exception here. He's cracked down on members of his administration that are lobbyists or will be lobbyists or have been lobbyists. There's a whole bunch of rules about that. He's liberalized a bit the Freedom of Information Act, saying that he's given orders to say that, look, if somebody comes in here and wants freedom of information, error on the side of giving it to them, not telling them why they can't have it. And then he took his second oath. He made a lot of cabinet appointments. Not all of them have been agreed. I just saw today that the Treasury Secretary has been approved today. And of course, the Hillary Clinton's been approved yesterday. So things are moving. I guess 7 or 8 people got approved the day he started yesterday. And he's taking a second oath because there was a bit of a hiccup there on the first one. So with that, I want to say get out and vote on January. I still got one more program to remind you. Keep an eye on the newspapers. Attend some of these meetings to see what's really going with the restructuring. This is all very important for our town. More likely than not, we are going to get this cut of next year, 1.3 million. We're certainly got the problem of 500,000 this year or so, give or take. And plenty of decisions have to be made. So try to help. Doesn't do any good to sit back and carp, but try to help with that. I wish myself happy birthday. Thank you very much. I'm amazed with all the travel I've done and all the countries I've been in and all the perils I've been around that I'm still here. So good luck this week. I'll be back again next week. And it'll be jam-packed with information, I'm sure. Thank you.